Hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Storytime. Now the story this week comes from Cwmnedd Primary School and a group of Year 6 children I worked with alongside storyteller Michael Harvey 3 years ago. And it is a story set in the North Pole. It is called Max and the North Pole. One cold winter's day, Max, his mum and dad, caught a plane to the North Pole to see Father Christmas. They had been planning and saving for this holiday for over 2 years and were looking forward to it. Luckily, they had a great time and even got to see Santa and his elves. Then they had to go home. They caught a bus to the airport. At the time, it was very close to Christmas, so the North Pole was a very popular destination. That meant that the airport would be very busy and it would be so easy for everyone to get lost. Max and his parents had just come out of security and were looking in all of the shops for souvenirs. Unfortunately, Max loved playing video games and he had just entered a shop selling them. "Max, we have to leave now, otherwise we'll miss our plane," called his mum, who was waiting for him outside the shop. Max couldn't stop looking at the video games, so he stayed a bit longer. And then, after about 5 minutes, he walked to the entrance of the shop and his parents were gone. "Oh no! What am I going to do?" said Max. "If I get lost, my mum told me to stay just where I am." So Max waited and waited, but nobody came. Eventually, he decided that the best thing to do would be to catch a bus back to the hotel where he would be safe. He wandered out to the steamy air of the airport into the breathtakingly cold air outside. He found a bus and asked the driver if it was going to the hotel. The bus driver, who had a big moustache, put his thumbs up and Max hopped on. The bus drove Max and some elves out to the airport, and after a while the elves got off to go to work in Santa's workshop. Then the bus carried on and drove for ages through the middle of nowhere, where eventually the bus stopped. The bus driver smiled at Max, put his thumbs up again, so Max thought, this must be the right place. He got off, turned around to wave at the bus driver. But when he looked around after the bus had gone, he saw that he was in the middle of nowhere. Max felt so sad that he cried and cried and cried, and the tears rolled down his cheeks and they slowly turned to ice. He thought to himself, "I'd better find shelter soon or I will freeze to death." Above him, the stars were gleaming in the sky and he started to walk towards a cliff where he found a cave. "Oh, great!" said Max to himself. "At least I found somewhere to shelter." As he walked into the cave, he could hear dripping ice in the dark. Gradually, he could hear the growling of an animal from behind him. Something had followed him into the cave. Max turned round and saw a polar bear. He crouched low and crept backwards to where the cave was really dark. Unfortunately, there was another polar bear at the back of the cave, and before long, Max was completely surrounded and thought that he was going to be polar bear food and would never see his parents ever again. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, Max saw a baby polar bear lying on the ground, hardly able to breathe, and he said, "What's wrong with him?" One of the oldest polar bears said, "Our baby is dying and we're all very sad. If you can save the baby polar bear, we will help you get back home." And of course, Max said, "I'll do anything." The oldest polar bear looked at Max and said, "You have to find a cure for our baby polar bear and we will give you this to help you in your search." He handed Max a beautiful golden ball. "This ball has been in our family for many generations. Take it and find a cure." "All right," said Max, "but what am I supposed to do?" The polar bear growled, "Just look, and remember, if you don't find it, We'll eat you up." So Max walked out of the cave with the golden ball in his hand, looking for a cure for the baby polar bear. It was pitch black outside. Then he realised there was light coming from high up in the sky. He looked up and, for the first time in his life, he saw the northern lights. But he had no idea what they were. There were green, red, yellow, blue and lights softly swaying through the whole sky. All of a sudden, the magic ball in his hand started to light up, so Max could see where he was going. He walked for ages looking for a cure, even though he didn't know where to start searching. Eventually, he stopped on a rock on the edge of the water. He suddenly heard a crack, and the ground under his feet broke away from land, and he realised he was standing on a block of ice which was now floating out to sea with no way of getting back to land. He got very angry with himself and said, "First I got separated, then I was surrounded by polar bears, and now I'm standing on a tiny piece of ice in the middle of the sea. Could it get any worse?" The night passed. And the next day, he was still on the ice and had no idea where he was or how to get back. All he had was this stupid golden ball. "I hate you," shouted Max at the ball. "This useless ball doesn't work." He threw the golden ball in rage into the huge ocean. Now, by chance, deep down in the ocean, there was a gigantic squid-like slimy monster they call the Kraken. The Kraken was surprised to see the shiny golden ball slowly coming towards him. "Well, that's a surprise," he said to himself. "I lost this to the polar bears many years ago. How did it end up here?" So in confusion, the Kraken swam up to the surface with a huge splash. Max was terrified and begged not to be eaten. With a voice as deep as the ocean, the Kraken asked, "Why are you here all alone on the edge of the ocean?" On the brink of tears, Max explained how he lost his parents at the airport and he was very scared, and to make matters worse, he had got on the wrong bus because he didn't speak the language, and how he had agreed to help a baby polar bear to survive so he could find his parents again. The Kraken was not as fierce and scary as before, and so Max asked, gasping, "Please, can you tell me how to use the magic ball? I'm begging you, it's a matter of life and death." But the Kraken just slowly sank into the sea, saying, "If you believe, it will work." As the Kraken disappeared into the depths, he pushed with all his might against the ice block and sent Max slowly drifting along the clear icy ocean towards the cold snowy surface. Finally, Max saw the shore, and there a white Arctic wolf sitting down waiting for him. "Oh no," said Max, "something else is going to try and eat me." But as he got to the shore, the wolf slowly approached him and gently licked his hand. Then he looked up and told Max to get on his back, and off they went back to the polar bear's cave. When they arrived, the polar bears were waiting for him by the entrance to the cave. "Is the baby still alive?" asked Max. The mother bear nodded, sadly. They all walked into the cave and Max saw the baby bear's eyes slowly closing. Max closed his eyes too, and he held the ball out and he believed with all his heart and soul, and slowly the baby polar bear gradually opened his eyes and saw Max. Then he stood and stumbled towards his mother, and then they licked each other lovingly. The oldest polar bear said, "Get on my back. It's time to get you home." They travelled for hours and eventually they got to the bus stop, and after about 10 minutes, the bus arrived, driven by the bus driver with a big moustache. He smiled and waved Max on board, again with a thumbs up. Max got to the airport and saw his parents waiting for him. He jumped off the bus and ran towards them. "Max, Max, where have you been?" asked his mum. "Mum, there was a polar bear and a golden ball and Arctic wolves and the biggest squid you've ever seen." "What? You don't make any sense," interrupted his mum. Suddenly, the bus door opened again and the polar bear jumped off and gave Max a big bear hug. When they saw the bear, Max's mother and father understood that Max was telling the truth, and soon they were in the aeroplane when Max told them the whole story. And now every time it snows, Max remembers what happened, and he goes outside and makes a snow bear to remember his friends in the North Pole. And that was Max and the North Pole, by a group of Year 6 children at Cwmnedd Primary School 3 years ago. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I hope you'll come back next week for another Sunday Storytime. Until then, bye for now.